Hey, I'm Max and welcome to the Launch and Destroy game tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to make this game right here in Unity where you can throw different balls with different power, like this one. If I click and makes it bounce, you can destroy some boxes, and when you hit the enemy, the level ends and you can go to the next level or back to the menu. In this part, we'll start adding some features in the map, some actual objects that we can hit and destroy. First up, there's the metal box right here. Obviously it's way too big, so I'll set it to probably 0.1. That might even be too big. That's pretty good actually. I'll put it down here. I'll give it a box collider 2D and a rigid body 2D. Then I'll add the metal rod. Same thing, 0.1, 0.1. I'll give it a rigid body 2D and a box collider 2D. I'll rotate it 90 degrees so we can test if it works. Then we have a small rock. I'll make it actually small, and then I'll give it a box collider 2D. I don't really care if it's not accurate, or actually just to be accurate, I'll give it a polygon collider 2D. And this one I will actually not give it a rigid body because I don't want it to be movable. Then the box parts, I'll simply drag them all in. You can see it builds my box. And I'll put them all under one game object. I'll call it box. And simply put all of the parts inside, and now that box I'll reduce the scale and drag it over here. I'll do the same thing for the wood box, so part 1, part 2, part 3, any empty game object, wood box, drag in the parts, reduce the scale and drag it over there. Okay, so let's make sure that the collisions all work. Let's try my rock over here. It seems to work. Yep, it works. Now the metal box, it might be moving a little bit too much, but for now that's gonna be okay. Now let's try the other box, and I forgot to give them rigid bodies. Now for these two boxes right here, I'll give them both a rigid body 2D and a box collider 2D, like on the game object that all the parts are in, not on the parts themselves. And I will need to change the size of those box colliders because they are way too small. So this one like this looks good, and now the other one like this is pretty small as well, so I'll make it bigger. Like this looks good. So now let me try out those boxes. Let's hope I can reach them. And yep, the wood one seems to work fine, and the supplies normal box as well. Now you can notice both the wood and the like cardboard, I guess, and metal are getting pushed around the same. And that's because they have the same mass. You can see here in the rigid body, mass 1. So to make them heavier, I'll simply increase the mass of the wood to, let's say, 3. And on the metal rod and metal box, I'll set the mass to, let's say, 7. So now if I lunge and I hit the metal, it should stop me pretty hard. Yep. And now if I go and hit, for example, the cardboard, it should move as it did before. And the wood, it's a bit harder. Now let's add a script to make it so we can break those boxes if we hit them hard enough. So create a new C# script and call it something like Destroyable. In the Destroyable script, we'll add void on collision enter 2D. And by default, my Visual Studio fills this in. And for now, we'll just debug.log collision.relative velocity. Then I will add the destroyable script to both my box and wood box. And now if I hit them, we can see in the console the relative velocity. So you can see if I don't hit them strong, it's low, and if I hit stronger, then it's a lot more. So to break it, we'll probably need this, so at least like 10. So now I'll create a public void explode or something, like to make the pieces go everywhere. In here I want to loop through every child of the game object, so every part in the game object. I want to give them each a rigid body, and for the wood I think I'll do a collider as well. And then throw them in a random direction and give them a random speed. And also when we send a part flying, we will remove it from our transforms. Like we will remove it from the being the child, so we cannot do for each child transform because that goes in order. So let's say we have 3 child, so 1, 2, 3. If we go in order, we'll do 1, then we'll give it its thing, and then we'll remove it, and then it will go to number 2, But number 2 will now be number 3, so then it will do number 3, and then it will try to go to number 3 because it only did 2 and there was 3. So it will try to go here when really there's nothing there. It's really here that it should be. So instead what we want to do is go in the opposite order. So it goes to the third one, and then it removes it and gives it its rigid body and everything. Then it goes to the second one, removes it, gives it its stuff, and then the first one. So because of this we need to go in the opposite order. So for this I'll do for int I equals to transform.child count -1, because if we have 3 child we want to start at the array 2 because it starts from 0. Then I is greater or equal to 0 and I minus minus. So it's the opposite of what we usually do with for int loops. Inside here I'll do GameObject part equals to transform.getChild I dot GameObject. Then I'll do part.addComponent rigid body 2D. I actually need to get an instance of it so I can change the velocity, so I'll do rigid body 2D RB equals to that part.addComponent. Then I'll do RB.velocity equals to new vector2 random.range. Then I'll do, let's say, -5 to 5 for both the X and the Y, or actually the Y I'll do 0 to 5. Then I'll do RB.angular velocity, so the spin equals to random.range 100 to 300. And I will add at the top a public bool parts colliders, so we can set if the parts will have colliders. And I'll do if parts colliders. I will also do part.addComponent, let's say polygon collider 2D to make sure it's the right size. And in the onCollision enter 2D I'll do if collision.relative velocity.magnitude is greater than, let's say, 10 for now. We might increase it later. Or in fact we could add a public float force to break, so we can change it depending on the type of material it is. So if the magnitude is greater than force to break, I will simply call the explode. And I almost forgot, after adding all of the parts to the child, we want to do transform.getChild I.parent equals to null, so it's no longer a parent of the empty game object. And after removing all of the parts as child, we can destroy the game object, because now it's an empty game object with no child. And since we don't want the parts to lay around forever, even though it probably won't matter in our game since we have a level system, or we will have a level system, and there will not be 1,000 boxes to break in the level probably, but just in case, I'll do destroy part in, let's say, 30 seconds. So now if I go on my boxes, I add a force to break of 10, and for the wood one I'll do part colliders. Let's test it out, see if it works. I'll save my scene in case, because sometimes you can lose everything if you don't save your scene for too long. And now if I hit the box, it breaks, and this one breaks as well. The other one doesn't have a collider and falls through the map, and this one does have a collider. And if we don't hit them hard enough, they don't break. So this seems to be working fine. Let me just make a test map real quick to see if everything works fine. By the way, if you want to make sure to always have the right settings on your items instead of always duplicating them, and make it so later if you want to change, for example, the first to break wood, you have to change it on each one and it can get very annoying. So instead you can create a folder, call it Prefabs, and then inside you can simply drag your objects and change them as prefab. And that way, whenever you want to add an object, you can just drag it from here and you're sure that it's always going to have the colliders and everything you want. And also, if you add multiple prefabs and then you change it down here in the prefab, you change the setting, it's going to change it for everything in the scene. Okay, so this is kind of random, but I just put a bunch of things and let's see how they look. First I'll check in the scene to make sure the gravity works, and it does. And this one actually broke by itself. And now if I shoot and I go above the boxes and I hit a bunch of them, it seems like the physics is working fine and it's slowing me down and it's breaking them. So it's pretty much exactly what I was hoping for. Thanks for watching this part of the tutorial. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like and leave a comment. It helps me a lot and it makes me feel a lot better. Since I'm still a very new YouTuber, I feel sometimes like I'm talking to a brick wall, like no one's watching me. So if you can leave a comment, I would greatly appreciate it. Check out the other parts when they're out, and feel free to subscribe if you want to see them and they're not all out yet. And also make sure to go check out my other Unity tutorials, because they might help you if this one helped you.